And we'll start with item 2.1, changes to the agenda and approval of agenda. And just so y'all know, we did, if you did not notice, you had 2 emergency add-ons last night, and that would be 8.21 and 8.22, I believe is what the numbers were. And when we get down there, I'm sure if you have any questions to ask, we'll do that. Recognitions, item 3.1, recognition of Tom Lattinser. Did I say that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Music teacher at Shalimar Elementary, selected as local VFW Post 7674 Teacher of the Year and nominated by the district. VFW for the Smart Meyer National Citizenship Education Teacher Award, and that will be presented by Mr. Chambers. And then administrative visitors, we don't have anybody now. Item 5 is administrative personnel appointments. 5.1, appointment of Assistant Principal 2, Destin Elementary. Item 6, public comment. And then item 7 is committee and staff reports. Item 7.1 is in-county travel paid for the period of December 12th, 2019 through January 8th, 2020. Item 7.2 is out-of-county travel paid for the period of December 12th, 2019 through January 8th, 2020. Item 7.3, quarterly report, service agreements under the $5,000 threshold of internal and budgetary funds. Item 7.4, quarterly report, service agreements for law enforcement presented by Vince Wyndham. And then 7.5, quarterly report, short-term facility use contracts and lease agreements under the $5,000 threshold. We'll move down to 8. 8.1 will be the approval of the consent agenda. 8.2, approval of the minutes of student disciplinary hearing of January 9th, 2020, workshop meeting of January 9th, 2020, minutes of regular meeting of January 13th, 2020, recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.3, appropriation of District 5 School Board member capital outlay funds to Lewis School for the conference room update in the amount of $3,138.15, presented by Dr. Diane Kelly and recommended by the superintendent for approval. Appropriation of District 1 School Board member capital outlay funds to Choctawhatchee High School for Chromebooks and a Chromebook cart in the amount of $10,277.20, presented by Dr. Lamar White and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.5, appropriation of District 5 School Board member capital outlay funds to Choctawhatchee High School for Chromebooks and a Chromebook cart in the amount of $10,277.20, presented by Dr. Diane Kelly and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.6, appropriation of District 5 School Board member capital outlay funds to Lewis School for front office carpeting in the amount of $5,922.45, presented by Dr. Diane Kelly and recommended by the superintendent for approval. 8.7, request to advertise a public hearing for a revised job description for social worker, presented by Lindsay Maxey, Program Director, Human Resources. 8.8, request to advertise a public hearing for a revised job description for mental health counselor, presented by Lindsay Maxey, Program Director of Human Resources.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
One thing on that, Ms. Maxey, on the job description, at the bottom it says terms of service, 10 or 12 month. So how is it, how does it say both? I'm just curious, what is it probably going to be?
And so that actually is currently on the job description right now. It says 10 or 12, so that's
Right.
not a change. But so that would mean that depending on budget and allocations and ESC and finance working together, they could potentially have a 10-month mental health counselor or a 12-month mental health counselor.
What is it now?
They're all 12-month right now.
Right now they're 12.
They're all 10-month right now?
Yeah, except for I think 1 or 2. So they're all 10 months. I think there's 1 12.
Okay,
I'm sure they're all the exact.
okay.
We will find out that answer for you.
And so what determines the difference? I'm just curious
So
how
we
we,
have one that works through the summer to help build programs.
Okay.
And get pieces together, possible PD for the teacher,
Mhm.
those sorts of things.
Okay.
And then the 10-month are in the schools for the 10 months that students are in the school.
Is that the same for social worker and the mental health counselor?
I'm not, does the
Hold
job
on one
description say
second.
that? We do
So-
have 10-month and 12-month social.
Okay.
Yes. So we're not changing anything on that for the social worker as well, and
Okay.
it does say 10 or 12
And
months.
so we have both in each category, correct?
So most of those are 10-month with probably one
Okay, gotcha.
12-month
Mm-hmm.
to meet the needs in the summer when we're still doing staffings. We need to have those folks on
Sure,
staff.
and training and stuff like that. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Tim, if I may,
Yes, sir.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Lindsay explained to me that the major change here is that we've had to comply with a state direction to put in a master's degree, I believe.
Right. Yes.
And of course, I always love the verbiage down below after we require, which says we don't really have to, we don't want to, which makes it, much more palatable, but that's the main change here, isn't it?
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why we had to remove it. It was actually on the January meeting, and then DOE came out with that new rule December 22nd, so we had to kind of scramble and organize this. But yes, that is the main change. And then in the duties, this job description had not been updated in quite some time, and it read more like a truancy officer, and Terry Schroeder has helped edit this to where it's actually what is a social worker doing.
It sounded much more accurate.
Right.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other? We'll move down to item 8.9, budget amendment number 4, fiscal year 2019-2020, presented by Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 8.10, monthly financial statement for December 2019, presented by Rita Scallon, Chief Financial Officer. 8.11, invoices to be prepared for payment, prepared by Rita Scallon. And then 8.12, school donations, presented by Rita Scallon. 8.13, payroll warrant register and accounts payable warrant register for December 2019 totaling $36,198,727.24, and bank transfers for December 2019 totaling $5,130,000, presented by Rita Scallon. 8.14 is multi-year contract with FSS Solutions, presented by Vince Wyndham. 8.15, renewal of ITB 18-06 manufactured bus parts, presented by Vince Wyndham. 8.16, amendment to the agreement for school resource officer program between the School Board of Okaloosa County and the Sheriff of Okaloosa County for 2019-2020, presented by Steve Horton, Assistant Superintendent, MIS. 8.17, request approval for fundraising and planning only for a self-help project at Pryor Middle School to construct a CT outdoor carpentry lab, presented by Dr. Bill Smith. And I see we have CTE and Ms. Barron. Do y'all want to come up and talk about what's going to happen there real quick?
This sounds so cool.
Well, and the
This
reason,
is
and
great.
I'm glad she's here because I've actually been to that classroom, and I'm sure some of y'all have been there. It's really, really awesome what's going on over at Pryor. So while you're here, we'll let you go ahead and talk about it a little bit.
Good morning, Board. We're real excited about it. Greg Ranerson is the teacher we have there. The program is just taken off, exploded. They have moved from the very introductory level to real construction projects. They're in the process of building a stage riser in the courtyard for students. It'll be multi-purpose for students to present if they're running for an office, for meetings, outdoor eating area, counseling area in the springtime when it's nice. But it's being built. We worked in combination with Mr. Tom Cox and Steve Bolton to make sure that we were within codes. The students have done everything. They have dug the footings, poured the concrete. They're building the beam structure. It'll be sound. It has seating around it. It's a handicap ramp for it for accessibility, and meets all codes and standards. We'll be subcontracting the steel railing to meet that handicap code to the welding department or the welding students at Crestview High School. So really making it a collaborative project, and the kids are engaged at a high level. Greg Renierson says every time they're out there working and the other kids are walking past, they're trying to get through the tape and ask how they can get in the program.
Right.
So the demand is huge, and we're really excited about the follow-up, which will be at Choctaw High School for the next step.
And I believe if you want to actually see what is going on, you can go to Facebook, and I believe Get the Coast is the name of the Facebook
Yes, they
page.
did a great
And they did a
explosion on it.
nice little video of what was going on over there.
They're going to come back monthly between now and the time the project's finished
Right.
to do different segments on it. The outdoor lab that we're talking about constructing here is just, we converted an old IT lab into the construction lab, and it's just not big enough at all.
Right.
So,
Well, it was used for
Until-
industrial arts kind of
Right,
programs
so-
before, and this is a real construction program.
so in the time, before we can get the funds to actually do a bigger project that's covered, in the meantime, for them to be able to do things like roof joists and things like that, they have to have more space. So we're going to try to do almost like a pole barn type
Right.
covering, and have, so the kids can be covered from the elements, but they can have large pieces of wood out there to saw and work on. It'll also cut down on the noise for the 2 adjoining classrooms, which are our engineering and our computer-based classes. And so to be able to do those things outside, so it's kind of like, you're just hopefully one day have a roll-up door and
Right.
be able to let them work, let the indoors out and outdoors in, kind of an extended classroom.
The thinking is that they need, the job itself, the career path, the jobs are done outside. Now, if it's raining on a construction site, they don't work, but we can't afford that luxury. We need to still be able to work even if it's raining, but if it's cold, if it's hot, that's the real conditions they'll be working in, and we think it's important to expose the kids to that early on, so they know what their path entails.
We have several contractors that are already helping us with the donations of the materials and all that.
Well, I just had of course, there's a lot of talk in the community about what you're doing there with this program. And could you speak just for a moment to enrollment and how many kids are involved? And I've heard rumors that there's even a waiting list.
Right. Well, right now, we just have 7th and 8th graders involved in the program. We didn't have enough space or teachers or anything to do more than that, or we would have. We have 5 full sections.
Wow.
We limit it at 24 students per section just because of safety reasons. We can't have as many kids in there as we might in a normal
Right.
elective. And we only have 1 teacher in his first year, so he can only have 5 periods. So we have 5 full periods, and then we have a waiting list of 7th and 8th graders wanting to be in the program. So we did have to remove it earlier in the year 2 students for various safety violations. And so there was just the next one on the list got to move right up into that slot. So it's really helping them with their math skills. It's helping them with their being able to collaborate with others, make decisions as a group. So it's really helping them throughout the rest of their school day, and not just in the
Right.
construction lab, but they're doing amazing things out there.
And so what are they learning? I mean, is it
So they're learning measurement for sure. They're
Okay.
learning
carpentry? Are they learning?
Carpentry. It's a carpentry program.
All
So right now, what he was talking about with the deck is more like kind of like an outside seating deck. We to make
Mm-hmm.
even more space for our dining room areas and to let kids eat outside whenever it's nice. It's going to seat how many kids do you think it'll end up seating?
Probably
About
15 to 20 at a time. Could be.
And so that'll just give, that much more room in our cafeteria. Teachers can bring part of their class out there. So it's just that right now they're doing a really big project to have only been in this program since August to be able to do that. They're pouring
Yeah.
footers, they're
Yeah.
doing everything. And they're so excited. I mean, I hear them talking about, this summer I'm going to build, decks on the back of the house. And I'm
Yeah,
like, oh,
well,
boy.
We
Yeah, they
Greg had
are.
to start
They are.
with
They're
some very
excited.
basics. The kids didn't know how to use
Right.
basic power tools, and
Right.
there's a safety concern there. So we started with really smaller projects, and the kids were just eating it up. And then with some potential donors that have been talking to us for the program, they were insistent that they need to do real construction. So we went from the birdhouses to a pretty major project, and
I think this summer we're going to try to do a boot camp where they're going to build storage sheds.
Good.
And
summer
so it's
camp.
kind of a summer camp. What did I say?
boot camp.
Boot camp. We call it summer boot camp, but summer boot camp. There you go.
Well, I just want to say,
Call it.
Mr. Destin and I remember when we were in school, together, by the way,
Yeah.
that we actually had shop
Yes,
and
we did.
mechanics. And in the community, I hear all the time that
Why
we
we
need to,
don't have it.
and why we need to bring those back. And so just want to commend both of you for doing that. And obviously, the kids are excited about it.
We are. And the girls, we have more girls
Yeah,
than
oh, that's
even
awesome.
than
That's
boys, so
awesome, that's
was-
awesome. And one last point or question that
Oh,
I
yeah.
have is, could you speak a little bit to community involvement in terms of, I think you may have had some donations to your
Yes.
program?
We did. We've had several large donations. We had someone from a trust in South Florida that, donated us quite a lot of money. We had Larry Klein, Nancy Klein have both been instrumental in
Awesome.
donations. We've had a partnership with Paul Hartzog with Dex and such. He's been
That's great.
instrumental. Lord and Son Construction has given us some things for the program. So we're really reaching out. Building industry is helping us. They're meeting with us and helping us, find other sponsors and other avenues, because the projects are really expensive. Just the deck that we're doing in materials alone is about $6,000. Lowe's has been huge, a
They
huge
really
help.
stepped up, yeah.
They donated all of our, like, $5,000 worth of power tools,
Wow.
lumber. They just gave us a trailer to go pick up different, supplies that are excess at job sites. They gave us that at cost. So, I mean, we're really getting a lot from our community. It's been really exciting to see that.
Again, commendations for that, and I'm just going to say this, that this has created a little bit of pressure for the superintendent and his staff, because there'll
It's a good
need
thing.
to be a matriculation path for these students as they move to Choctawhatchee. But again, commendations to both of you. Thank you for doing that.
Thanks.
And if I could just say something, you asked what they're learning, and I know Ms. Barron was happy to hear in that little video when Mr. Reinerson, who happens to be one of my former English students, said they had to work with language arts because they had to learn to write the proposal and all that, and request letters and all those things. So I'm sure you and I are both happy to hear the language arts piece in that.
Definitely.
Greg is running it and teaching them to run it like a business. They
That's right.
all
Yeah,
have jobs.
that's
There's a
great.
safety officer at
Right.
each table. I mean, he really is doing a phenomenal job of preparing the kids for their adult life over and above the construction skills.
And
We're
one-
very lucky to have him.
One last thing too that's really helpful with the program, we're able to bring in a lot of our special ed students, our ESE students, our VE students into the program as electives. A lot of them may not be interested in, music or engineering, but this is something that's hands-on that they can do that they're loving. And I think it'll give them an avenue right out of high school to go and really get a job that'll help take care of them in their future.
I think you're correct there, as what you're saying, an avenue. We're giving them an avenue to reach out and do something that, like you said, they can go right out and be productive. And but I agree with all my board members. It was really exciting to go in there and see those kids just really, hands-on enjoying themselves. So, and
We'd really encourage you guys when you're that way to come by. They're out there every day, with the exception of the rain, working on this.
Mr. Bryan, if I may, in the matriculation that Dr. White was talking about at Choctaw, do we have any plans, and perhaps the superintendent better addresses that, but we're going to go somewhere with this, right?
No, absolutely. And there's a couple things that I want to say as well, but going to the matriculation piece, David, if you would talk about, so not only what's going on at Pryor, what we're planning on doing at Choctaw, also talk about where else we have the carpentry program and plans for the future as it pertains to carpentry and construction, because what Dr. White stated earlier, I as well, I'm sure you people will say in the community, I had wood shop. We really need to bring that back. Well, this wood shop is what we had and more. So we're very proud of this, but if you would discuss that.
And it's the real construction standards, and we will be opening the program next year for Choctaw. We're working with Ms. Heck to work out the space arrangements and where and who will have to do that. We've interviewed some potential teachers for that already, and we will be moving forward with that. We've met with Bruner, and they have, the same shop class as Pryor had years ago. It's currently the maintenance department uses that, but we're in the process of making those changes, setting up a similar program for Bruner, and then the following year feed into Fort Walton Beach. Fort Walton Beach is a little bit more of a challenge from a space standpoint. Mr. Spolsky is to the gills. They don't really have anywhere to expand. But the beauty of a program like this, as Ms. Barron was speaking to, is it really is an outside construction job, and the needs for the lab is strictly a meeting planning. The kids have to be able to read the blueprints and do the takeoff and understand the yield of materials. What is your waste? How many of each component do you need? And then the construction part should take place outside, and it's mobile contractor table saws and chop saws, that just like it would be in the field.
And for the board members, just discuss at the north end of the county what we have in terms of carpentry and construction.
And we already have a program, a phenomenal new teacher this year at Baker. Mr. Patrick Fleming is doing a jam-up job there, and we're actually exploring the possibility of repeating the deck project or the stage project for Baker as well as for Laurel Hill. We have Mr. Ken Jackson there, and a very small population. It's a tricky program there because he has younger kids all the way through high school kids, and with the small numbers, they're really mixed classes, so we have to balance that carefully. But that program is in its second year. This is the second year, or the first year actually, for Baker with Patrick Fleming, and so he's doing a phenomenal job getting that program up. We're still focused on getting the tools and equipment there. Mr. What's the Lowe's guy's name? Jansen Thomas with Lowe's has made contact with his counterpart at the Crestview store to help with us tools and equipment. We expected initially for Pryor that it was going to take us, with Perkins funding and our various sources of funding and career tech, it was going to take us a couple of years to get all of the tools and equipment that would be needed for that lab. Lowe's stepped up and made it happen immediately. So the lab is fully functional now. They have all those tools. If we can make the same thing happen in the north end of the county, that will move that both programs forward more quickly.
And I'd also like to add, as it pertains to Pryor, Ms. Barron, her vision has been great with this program and the excitement that she's generated. If you have not seen Mr. Ryderson and gone to his class, this gentleman is absolutely fantastic, not only with the skill and knowledge, but with the way that he interacts with the students. And then you can take that to Laurel Hill. If you've been there, that program is absolutely fantastic, and as well as Baker. So this is exciting, and this is something that we're trying to expand in Okaloosa County. As you know, we have a strong building association, and a lot of builders in this area. They've asked for this as well. And just once again, with Mr. Ryderson, with what you've done, Ms. Barron, and the support, David, of UNCTE, this has been a fantastic venture, and we're looking to build and go further.
That Get the Coast video really went viral,
Right.
And we're getting all kinds of calls. The demand for workers in the industry is huge across the Panhandle, not just here.
So, Mr. Chambers, real quick, Brooke, while you're up here, I'm going to give you a little kudos there. So earlier in the year, I had the pleasure of going to Pryor, and Brooke didn't know I was coming, and she was out in the garden, and it was burning up hot, and she's in a dress and everything in the garden getting everything up. And I just thought that was showed awesome leadership, that you didn't flinch to go in there and clean up that garden a little bit. So, and of course, when a school board member walks up and of course you're like, oh my God, yeah. But I will say, and I agree with Mr. Chambers, when you go into Pryor with your leadership, you can definitely feel that in there. It's a great school. So I encourage all of our community members to go check out Pryor in all of our schools and see what's going on in there. So,
Thank you.
yep. Okay, so we're going to move down to 8.18, Memorandum of Understanding between the Military Child Education Coalition and the School District of Okaloosa County, presented by Cindy Gates, Director of Special Programs and Principal Evaluation. 8.19, Pathways to Career Opportunities Apprenticeship Grants for Fiscal Year 2019-2020, presented by April Branscombe, Program Director, Career and Technical Education.
And Mr. Bryant?
Yes, sir.
So this and David, if you come up as well. So this right here is also it's a big deal. As you know, the governor has set aside about $10 million for the apprenticeship program or the pre-apprenticeship program as well. I think about $7 million has already been expended, and there's about $3 million left. So we're putting in a proposal for this as well to help with carpentry and construction, kind of like what we just talked about, as well as the HVAC. But if you kind of share a little bit of the vision and as it matriculates up to Northwest Florida State College.
Right. We'll be doing the pre-apprentice part of that program, and in partnership with Northwest Florida State College, we'll have the apprenticeship portion. The apprenticeship portion requires 2,000 hours of work experience per year, which is impossible to do in the high school environment because of transportation and the courses that the students are having to take in addition to this elective. But this pre-apprentice will prepare them with real hands-on, especially the HVAC, another high-need area for the entire Panhandle. They will have hands-on with all the industry-level trainers and equipment that they'll need to be able to do that job, improved lab environment and situation there at Crestview High School, and these kids will be in the pre-apprentice learning all the skills with the tools and equipment, but in addition the soft skills they need to work in the environment, and that will prepare them to apply for the apprenticeship program at the college level where they can work and earn an income while they're finishing their school.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, David.
Okay, move down to 8.20, course adoptions for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Denise Berry, curriculum specialist.
And that looks like it's related to our carpentry.
Yep,
Yeah.
it's got the carpentry.
Good idea.
Yep. And these are the two that were added on. 8.21, tag-on bid purchase over $25,000, Cobb Pediatric Speech Services, presented by Vince Wyndham. And then 8.22 is a tag-on bid purchase over $25,000. Solient Health Incorporated, presented by Vince Wyndham.
I did have a question.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly to whom to address it. but-
I've asked Rita to kind of
Okay,
fill
so-
in. Miss Doxy Willis has
Okay.
locked her keys in her car.
So my question really isn't about the funding, but about the services to students. So did we just have a sudden influx of students needing speech and language, and we hadn't provided services previously? Or are we just now deciding that we need to provide a service that was previously not available?
No, we struggle to get speech therapists as well as psychologists. We've had to contract outside of the district with folks, and sometimes they say they're coming and then they don't come, or they come and they only stay for a short while because they can get paid more and have a smaller load in the private sector. So we continually are trying to get different options. So these are contracted positions to bring more speech therapists in to meet our needs that we already have.
So how many students?
I couldn't give you a
Need to
number.
be
I would
served.
have to, we have a lot.
So we had some gaps then in the service provided?
Yes.
And needed to fill?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I have a question also, and I understand you're struggling on that, and I understand why everybody is trying to hire the few that are available, and it costs a lot of money. What bothers me is the emergency nature of this. We're being asked to approve a contract that we don't have in front of us on the basis of some letters of agreement, and we only have one of those. And that's what concerns me, that it's gotten to an emergency status. And here we are trying to approve things, to vote on a contract that I've not written. That's very hard or read. It's very hard to do. How did we get to the emergency situation we're in? Have we not been able to provide services to some students?
Yes, yes. So I think it was last agenda, we have a tele contract, so we thought that was going to take care of our needs. So that's where a student is on an iPad, but it's one-on-one with a speech person not here. And so we thought that would take care of our need, but well, in actuality, that will only provide us, I think, with 4 or 5 more speech therapists. and that doesn't meet all of our needs. So it was continuing to try and find, and so within the time frame to get things onto the board agenda and the needs that our students have, I believe that's why Dr. Doxey put this on
And I would
as an
just take it a
emergency.
step further. I well remember, and some other folks at this table may also remember, that even when we had those services scheduled and we had a contract in place, we had folks that didn't show.
Yes,
to
and that
provide those
has occurred
services
multiple
for
times this year.
students. So
Mhm.
I understand the dilemma, although I understand Mr. Destin's point about the contract. Mr. Attorney, is that something that can be resolved before Monday night to have some kind of draft or of what we might be
Certainly.
looking at?
And they're both tag-on bids, so I'll get with purchasing and double-check and see what kind of documentation.
Well, undoubtedly, there is a contract that we're tagging on to somewhere.
Right.
That's correct.
That
Well,
can't
and-
be too hard to find.
And Mr. Wyndham is here, so Vince, if you want to come up and maybe give us your expert analysis on this. And I noticed that Heather has walked in too, so board members, if you have a question for Ms. Willis Doxey, she is here.
So actually, the Escambia County School Board contract that we're tagging on to, you've already approved previously. And so what we're doing now, any purchase, exempted purchase over $25,000 has to come back to you to be approved. So that's what we're doing. We're setting up the individual companies. This contract has about 25 or 30 contractors on it.
But there are no additions or deletions or any changes?
That's right.
It is the one that you're proposing for us to approve now?
That's correct. And the contract is basically the RFP as written.
The same thing as it
All these
was.
vendors sign the same RFP. There's not like separate contract documents. And like I said, in this case, I believe y'all have already used a couple vendors off this bid. So we just basically got 2 more vendors that they're trying to put in place. So those contracts or those POs, you would say, are going to be over $25,000. So we're bringing those to you so they can set those POs up and go forward.
It's just out of curiosity, when I was reading through on the financial component of this, cost says unknown. So if it's over 25,000, it's not unknown, is it?
Well, what they'll end up with is a purchase order to that company, and it's written as needed. That's
Yes.
when we bring it to you, is as needed. So what you're basically approving are the rates off the contract, and then it's an as-needed contract.
Ms. Scanlon, how do we work our accounting magic on something like that?
What happens is that we have allocated funds for speech therapists to employ by the school. And because we're not able to employ the number of speech therapists that we need, then there are funds available there that then I will use to pay the contract, because the contract is going to supplement or be in place of instructional positions that we have hired as a district.
So we do have a rough estimate of what we anticipate we'll spend since that money was already allocated?
I mean, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I can get you that information. We have speech teachers allocated. So if we have, I'm just throwing numbers out, but let's say we had $1 million worth of speech therapists and we're only able to find, 500,000, then I have 500,000 that I can use for this contract to get services through a contract. And of course, I'm not going to go over that total amount, because if I were, then I'd have to come back to the board to ask them to allocate additional funds.
Well, it would be good to have those numbers at least, so.
I will.
As we go forward. And this problem's has been plaguing us since even last summer, my understanding?
It's been plaguing us for probably the
Years,
last
yeah.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's,
this
it's not.
this position, the school psychologist position, when you look at surrounding counties, for example, when I go to the superintendent meetings as well, so these are positions that across the state of Florida, it's difficult to hire. So we have also been in contact, when I say we, Dr. Doxey's been in contact with the state of Florida as well, because there's certain students who don't necessarily get the services because you simply don't have the teacher to be able to provide those services. So making sure that we have the contract in place is important. We've also gone to, like Ms. Lightbourne said, this software program that many districts across the state of Florida are going to now because it's difficult to hire these individuals. So I will say Dr. Doxey has done a great job really working this situation. This is something that we talked about in the summer as well, as we get into this hiring season for 2020-21, this is something that we're also trying to be even more proactive and looking to find these individuals earlier as well. But I do want to reiterate, Dr. Doxey's done a good job of even communicating with the state of Florida on this matter.
And Superintendent, and you spoke to this, and just from some past experience, I would add, and I think by now the public understands that these are employees that we just can't find.
Correct.
That we can't hire, and so we have to go out and arrange some kind of contract. But I would also say that it's very, very difficult to continue to try to find these people, and I expect that this contract will be something that we'll probably be maintaining for quite some time.
Absolutely. Yes.
All right, thank you.
So we're
Thank
going
you,
to move.
Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Item 9, Superintendent Human Resource Recommendations. The first two are informational. 9.1 is Employees on Administrative Leave, presented by Dr. Lee Hale. 9.2 is the Deferred Retirement Option Program, the DROP. Item 9.3, Cleared Certification Requirements and Issuance of Contracts for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Karen Peak, Program Director of Professional Services. 9.4, Out-of-Field Report for the 2019-2020 school year, presented by Karen Peak. 9.5, Employment Separations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale. 9.6, Personnel Recommendations, presented by Dr. Lee Hale. 9.7, Employee Transfers. 9.8, Reinstatement, Reimbursement of Sick Leave due to Line of Duty, Illness, Injury, Medical Examination. And item 9.9, Leave Without Pay, presented by Dr. Lee Hale. Number 10 is Discussion Agenda. 10.1, nothing as of now. And then we'll move down to 11, Construction Program Owners, Representative Business. 11.1, Program Status, Report by Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Chairman. As you can see, we are moving forward on 4 or 5 of our projects. A roofing project in Niceville, kitchen in Pryor, up in Baker. So we are making good progress in getting our Faithful and Gould to give us the price validation. I missed the last construction meeting. I was out of town. Dr. Smith, do you have anything you need to add? So we're plugging along.
Well, and I also understand that the Niceville project, we're going to be able to do a little bit more than what we had anticipated. So, and Dr. Smith's making his way up, and I know that will be on one of the items here, item 11.5, so we'll let you.
As we previously discussed with the storm over a year ago now, the roofing market got very, very compacted and got very, very expensive. We have continually tested the market to see what costs we're doing. We felt like that it was the right time. This is a very old task order. It's been out there for a good while. Felt like it was the right time. We went out and tested the market again. We actually got better numbers than we expected, so we were able to do 3 areas at Niceville High School instead of 2.
Awesome. And so we'll go 11.2, Authorization for Professional Services Agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 6, task order number 6, Pryor Middle School kitchen renovation. And then 11.3, Authorization for Professional Services Agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 6, task order number 7, Longwood Elementary Corridor construction and site fencing.
And I especially like this one, Chairman. This also adds to the security of the school, so that's a good thing.
11.4, Authorization of Professional Services Agreement from Faithful and Gould for price validation for program number 6, task order number 4, Baker kitchen renovation. And then 11.5, program number 6, task order number 1, GMP for the roofing project at Niceville High School, 500 building gymnasium and kitchen dining behind gymnasium. And Mr. Destin, I would just like to thank you and your team for all that you do. As the public can see, not only are we trying to get these projects done, but when we can find price savings and add more to those particular projects, I think it's a great thing. And just to show the public too that with the limited amount of funding that we have for these projects, that these particular projects, we're not putting Band-Aids on, we're actually fixing them and making them solid for years to come. So.
Well, I want to assure you, it's the team. I simply bask in their expertise.
I have a question on this one.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Smith, this roofing at Niceville on the 500 building, that's been done?
No, ma'am.
What was the other one we did that,
You talking about the 400 building?
oh, okay, the 400 building? Okay.
If you think of some of these larger schools that have been an add-on of an add-on of an add-on of an add-on, every time you add on, you create a different area.
Right.
So you're actually roofing areas till you get to a stopping spot, because you don't want a coal seam in the middle of a roof. Some of them are large, some of them are small, so you try to do whatever you can afford to do within the budget you've got.
Okay, I just knew that we had done some roofing there on a building, so I
There's
just had, yeah.
there's a lot of
Buildings, yeah.
places.
Yeah.
And
Thank
there
you.
are a couple more that are in bad need. We simply don't have the money this year in Niceville.
Those areas are too large
Yeah.
for the amount of money we have.
So you're doing the
So if
smaller
you-
building pieces, yeah.
If you have a list of roofs and you're talking about a $3 million spot or a $2 million spot, but you only have $1.5 million to spend,
Yeah,
it limits you.
gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And of course, this is what the half cent is all about.
Absolutely.
We can't
Yeah.
afford to fix anything completely because
We're
we
just
don't have the
doing
money.
pieces right now, yeah.
Yeah.
Section 12, Information Technology Seat Management Contract, nothing there. Item 13, Attorney's Business, Mr. McInnes.
Just one item. On Monday night at the meeting, I asked the board, at the last, the meeting in December, item 8.31 on the agenda was an autism spectrum disorder endorsement add-on program, and you approved that, and it's gone back to DOE, and you approved it with, at that time, we had the program year dates were 2020 through 25. DOE has contacted the district and said if you want to begin offering the services before the end of this year, we need to modify that year, the dates on there. So Monday night, we would ask if you will authorize a correction to that agenda item at that meeting so that the dates will now be 2019 through 2024, and that will allow funding to start flowing in this school year. That's all I have to share.
All right, thank you, Mr. McInnes. Item 14, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Bryant. First of all, I appreciate the moment of silence you did for Mayor Wise. And I do want to say, just here publicly, I think all of us know Mayor Wise was an absolutely amazing mayor for Niceville since, I think, 1972. Any time that you met with him, he took time to stop, have a conversation with you. An amazing leader and an amazing example of a servant to a community. So just appreciate that, and just the thoughts and prayers go out to the Wise family. This past weekend was a busy weekend. We had a lot of Martin Luther King Jr. events that were going on. Many of us were at the MLK poster and oratorical contest. I was absolutely blown away with many of the posters that were there and some of the students who gave speeches. Amazing. 2 elementary students, a 5th grader and a 4th grader. If you were in there to see how they presented their speech, the vocabulary, the tone, the pace, just absolutely amazing, blew me away. But then we also had the Mlk Parade on Monday, which went extremely well. So I appreciate the schools and the work that they've done in preparing for this upcoming weekend, but it was very successful. As you know, tonight is the Teacher of the Year banquet. I know we're all excited about that, and I always like to say it's a night where we recognize the current Teachers of the Year, but it's also a night where we're recognizing the amazing work that teachers do in general, and we're blessed with that here in our county. Few meetings ago, we talked about a volunteer appeal process. So on Monday during my business, I'll have Ms. Gates come up and kind of brief us on exactly where we are. So we'll have a volunteer appeal process in place. So she'll have that information to you. It's not an agenda item or anything. So it's what we'll have. She'll have a packet for you all as well, and she'll be contacting you before Monday to discuss exactly where we are. So we've done that. I know, Mr. Destin, that was one of the things that we definitely wanted to do,
Absolutely.
but wanted to get back with you in the January timeframe. I have, so we were blessed through the Okaloosa Schools Foundation. You know how the military, they have a coin. The sheriff's office, they have a coin. So the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation, they were able to, which I appreciate, Ms. Ivanchek, Ms. Gates, they were able to purchase for us an Okaloosa coin. And on here, it has our insignia, insignia for Okaloosa County. It also has on here, everyone's important and no one's important. On the back, it highlights academics, arts, and athletics since 1915. So I wanted to present you all after this meeting with a coin, and I might do it like Sheriff Ashley does with the military and shake your hand and give you the coin. So I'm excited about this. This will be a recognition coin. It could be to our employees, it could be to community members, but once again, thank the Okaloosa Public Schools Foundation for funding this for us. And then
And it's just to say, no public dollars were used to purchase these coins.
which is why I stress the Okaloosa
Right.
Public Schools Foundation.
I just wanted to be emphatic.
Absolutely.
For $1.
Yes. And it's a source of, I believe it's a source of pride for this district, the amazing employees and the things that happen in this school district. And then the last thing I do want to say is I'm fortunate enough to go to a lot of events, fortunate enough to go into the schools, and I do want you all to know your presence, whether it be at the schools, at the events, or the things that you're doing for schools, whether it be board member money, the things that you all are doing. The neat thing is I hear all the time how appreciative our employees are of the board members and the things that you all are doing in the schools or helping the schools. And sometimes you don't necessarily hear the recognition that you deserve, but I do want to thank you because when we work as a team, it just makes a huge difference for the school district. So it is noticed, and I appreciate it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. So we'll go down to board members, and we'll start with Mr. Destin.
Thank you, Chairman. Since Dr. White and I were not at the last meeting, and perhaps this is a question for Mr. Chambers or for our attorney, kind of give me a brief on what we did on the half cent and what the role of the group that's going forward with us is, the Chamber and their associates.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Horton, if you would come up for a second. And we want to discuss the role of the Chamber, I think Ms. Anchors, in that relationship to us. And one of the things that I will say to kind of start off with the school district, you know, we are simply a conduit of information when requested to this group. And like we shared at the meeting, we are extremely appreciative of Ms. Anchors coming forward, the Chamber of Fort Walton Beach coming forward, as well as the chambers in general, as well as just community members. So the school district's role is more of a conduit to provide information to these groups when asked upon, but if you would elaborate on that.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chambers, and obviously Mr. McGinnis may be able to answer some questions that you have as well. What I do as a staff member under Mr. Chambers and working on behalf of the school district is I work with our own staff individually, internally, to identify capital needs within our district. And as you know, we've got a construction management partner, Jacobs Titan, who's contracted with us to help us do that. So the work that we do internally to determine the needs of the district is as it always has been. And so we do that independent of any other groups who may or may not be out there in support of funding for schools. At the request of the superintendent, you know, if that group and if and when that group asks for information from me with regards to enrollment information or needs at schools based on school input and our own information that we have on the condition of our facilities, I simply am, as Mr. Chambers said, a conduit to provide that information. It would be available to anybody who asks. That particular group doesn't play a role in any of that functionality in terms of looking at the needs within our schools. I think, as Ms. Anchor stated here, they want to be out there and supporting an effort to improve and increase funding for Okaloosa County schools. They don't play a role in anything in terms of the work that we do and the work that I do in operations to kind of look at the condition of our roofs and understand what priorities exist in the district. So I don't know if that's part of the answer you're looking for, but Mr. McGinnis could add to it or address other questions.
That's exactly the answer I'm looking for. They are folks who promote to the decisions that the internal staff and our consultants make.
That is correct. That is correct.
That's exactly the clarification I was looking for, since I wasn't at the meeting. But that all sounds like a very good arrangement, and I certainly appreciate the fact that they're going to promote this issue that's vitally important to us, because as a group, we really can't do that. But to have community partners that will do that for us makes all the difference in the world.
Yes, sir.
Well, one thing I wanted to add real quick for Mr. Destin and Dr. White, it was that, in the paper, I think the next day, it was saying that we voted that it's going to be on the ballot in 2020, which that did not happen. So I just wanted, what the clarification was that, we just authorized the superintendent, which added his request. So it wasn't a vote to put it on the ballot, just so everybody knows that. So it was just.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll further clarify that for that to happen, the board will need to direct me as your attorney to bring you back a resolution, and only when you adopt that formal resolution in a public meeting will the final decision be made that it will be requested to be on the ballot. And so as the district staff and the superintendent continue working on developing the project priority list that they'll be bringing to you, and that is an internal list that's being developed, then timing will work out as to when you're ready to direct that resolution be prepared and brought back, and that'll be a function of me as your board attorney in doing that work for you.
Right. And also, Mr. Desson, to answer another comment that you made about our role, and I've asked Mr. McGinnis that moving forward that he contacts all of us to make sure that as elected officials we understand what we can't do, can't say, and all that moving forward. So if there is any questions, he'll be able to answer that on with those particular items. So.
And Mr. Bryan, I'd like to add just one more thing that I'd like Mr. Horton to elaborate on. So, we've talked about, so you've heard the words priority list, or working on that list, but it's, I just want to clarify, so this isn't something that we've just said, what does the state of our schools look like? Let's try to figure this out. So if you'd kind of talk about, just elaborate a little bit on, so we know a priority list, so to speak, and this is something that's been on our mind not only now, summer, last year, so kind of talk about that.
Yes, sir. So I can go into categories as it relates to, for example, safety in our schools. We're not out there right now asking what safety needs there are. We've identified those, we've articulated them, and we know that we're already beginning a process to improve safety in all of our schools. As it relates to classroom space, the board is well aware that we have 160 portables. That's not something we're figuring out here in the last month. We know that. Jacobs Titan, our partner, knows that. So we're looking at those as potential priorities for educational space. As it relates to the condition of our buildings, we know roofs that need to be replaced. We've got a list of those things. It's just as Mr. Destin said earlier, the funding is not available right now to proceed with a lot of that. We have to kind of prioritize those things. So the budget, the priority list is not something that's being created right now. What I will say, and the superintendent has talked to me about this before, is he's been in that position for approximately a year. I've been in this new role in operations, and Mr. Destin has brought this up in the past. We've got to do a better job as a school district in long-term strategic planning. We have project lists, and we know that things need to be done. So, if you ask me to bring forward $500 million worth of needed projects, I could probably do that next week. I think it's most important that our strategic plan over the next 5 years be fully developed and vetted. I think, and it's just an opinion of mine, we know the needs are there. So in terms of the question of a resolution, I think that is there, and I think that's a priority. But I think we owe it to the citizens, to the taxpayers and everybody, to make sure that that strategic plan is in place long before they're asked to cast a ballot, if that happens in the fall. So I think that's something that the superintendent has asked and is committed for us doing, and making sure that you have that available, that everyone has that available, and we go through that process. And again, we know needs out there in the schools, but I think we as a district owe it to our citizens, our taxpayers, to be as forward-thinking as we can. So whether that means thoughts about where schools need to be built in the future, whether it be 3 years down the road, those kind of things need to happen, and that's the project that I'll take on to make sure that you have that clear vision. And I think Dr. White and Mr. Destin and board members from time to time have always talked about that our strategic plan needs to be more robust, and things could change over the course of 5 years, but goodness, you go into a plan based on assumptions that are made, and then you follow through. That way we all have a clean roadmap for, okay, let's say we can do a lot of the work that needs to be done now, but then what? And so I think we owe that to folks.
If I could add to that, Mr. Superintendent and Mr. Chair, a question I'm often asked, and some of you may get the question as well, is why do we find ourselves in such a situation? And one of the answers historically is that I can remember back in a time when we did get appropriate funding through PECO, Public Education Capital Outlay dollars, and substantial amounts. Well, those amounts have not completely dried up, but they have diminished greatly. So we no longer get stipulated funding for capital needs to the districts, not just ours, but all Florida districts, as we once did. And when you look at the history of that, those funds were tied to utility fees, specifically landline phones. And when you think historically what's happened to landline phones, hardly any of us have those anymore. Rita, is that correct? So when you look at the history of that, it gives you an opportunity to better explain to our constituents just why, not just our district, but all Florida districts find ourselves in a need for capital money to the degree that we have never before in our history seen.
And Dr. Kelly, if I could just follow up on that, you're exactly right. And of course, what we know is that roughly 20 years ago, some of us remember that the school board was in the same shape. And one of the ways that they were able to build the new schools that are not so new anymore, 20 years ago, even longer, was they borrowed against our capital outlay money. And so that money is tied up in debt service. And so I think those are the kinds of things that it's important for us to share with the public, because, and I know this is not my time, but since Mr. Morgan is at the podium, as we go out and attend various functions and so forth, since it's been in the newspaper and since we voted and met and discussed this initiative, we're going to be asked questions. And I know that you're going to, Mr. Attorney, provide some information to us about how far out on the limb we can go with our remarks. But I think it might be advantageous if, particularly in my case, my colleagues may or may not want this, I would appreciate just kind of a one-pager, an executive overview, if you will, of the need and maybe some of the kinds of strategic planning issues that we're facing, whether it be safety, roofing, or, as I've had the question asked to me, what are we going to do about the 3,000 homes that are being built in Niceville and the additional 1,000 homes that are being built in Crestview? And are we going to be looking at new schools? And that may be part of your strategic plan. I'm not sure, should the citizens approve this initiative. But I would appreciate having something like that. And in my opinion, it might be advantageous if all of the board members had that, so that we could be speaking off of the same page, so to speak. But that would be my request, and I can tell you that, quite frankly, that was needed yesterday. So as soon as that could be put together, that would be a request that I would make.
And Dr. White, I totally agree with you. I know I talked to Steve the other day about us being on the same page with the district. So yes, if we can get that done, I think it will help us all be on the same page, and we're not, like you said, going out on different limbs there, so.
And absolutely, and we will we'll definitely get that for you and get that for you expeditiously. And I do want to add one piece, because as we're talking about this conversation, because this comes up anywhere I go as well when this conversation comes up, and Dr. White hit it right on the head. So the homes in Niceville that are coming up, the homes in Crestview, and the question is, are we preparing, for that? And of course, we do prepare for that. So if you would kind of address that a little bit, Mr. Horton, as well as enrollment and how we monitor enrollment.
Yes, Mr. Chambers. So we, as it relates to the subdivision in Niceville that's online, we've been meeting with that entity regularly to kind of project and look at numbers of houses. And one of the things that you know very well, a 3,000 home development over many, many years has an impact on schools, will ultimately have an impact on schools, but maybe not this year, and maybe not next year, and maybe not even 3 years down the road. But it's important for us to continue to keep those lines of communication open and develop. And again, we know that in Niceville, for example, our elementary schools have portables. And so the priorities have to be set for what's a reasonable size for an elementary school. How much do you want it to grow before you move on to another option? So those are part of the things that go into strategic planning. I think obviously what we provide you is, there's nothing approved about that. It's just an understanding for folks that these are being contemplated and these are some possible options. But you're right, it is absolutely incumbent upon us to do that. Same thing that happens in the north end. We watch those developments and those orders, development orders carefully, and Mr. Smith stays in tune with those, Dr. Smith does, and trying to project the speed with which those developments take place. And then again, looking at actual new entries into the counties, because you could have a 300 home development created, and you may have 250 families relocate from in Okaloosa County to take up many of those homes. So it's really a matter. So then you're talking about shifting demographics of population and changing enrollments in schools where one may drop and one may increase. So there obviously is a lot that goes into that. But as I've said to you, our district has been growing at about a 1.5% rate per year. And so over 5 years, if that amounts to another 1,500 or 2,000 students, then that sounds like an entire new school, right? So, yes, sir. So I think that a lot of that will be included in our discussion.
And remind me, if you will, because I have a number that's in my head, but remind me, Davidson Middle School over the course of the next 3 to 5 years is projected to be approximately at what number?
They could be in the next 3 years, they could get over 1,200, which is what Ruckle is right now. So that growth is continuing in the north end. It is continuing.
And for those that might not know Davidson, of course, up on the north end, Davidson was built to be added on to eventually, if we needed to. But with the way it's funded now, we've had to put portables out there. And but a lot of the newer schools, like Dr. White said, they're 30 years old, and but they were designed to be added on to. But with not having that funding piece to do it that way, we're having to put portables out there.
Yes, sir. And as you know well, Mr. Bryant, when you add on classroom space, you've got to consider all the other components of it, the site pieces. So is the cafeteria sufficient to serve the students? Is there enough parking for folks? And all those components have to go into it. And then there becomes a tipping point at a certain time where if you're going to be doing certain things at this school site and this school site and this school site to handle additional capacity, is it more economically feasible? Is it a better direction to just have a new campus somewhere and go in that direction?
And I want to highlight that point. And I'm only stressing this right now because you get a lot of these questions as you go out in the community, and I just want to reiterate the thought that's going into all of this, and you all expect us to have this thought. So what Mr. Horton just said, just reiterating, is a thought of a new school, and not to say that we're building a new school, right? But the thought of a new school, that if you do build a new school, what is the impact on the surrounding elementaries to relieve the maybe overcrowding.
You're
for
not
example.
using the word rezoning, are you?
No.
You did not hear me say rezone.
Wash his
but-
mouth out, so-
I could just hear J.C. Connor's voice in my head as we were talking and thinking about all of these
But
comments.
let's be for real, though.
So
I
what
mean,
happens?
that's
Uh-huh,
something we
exactly.
might have to discuss in the future
Exactly.
if,
You do a new school.
right.
Absolutely.
And rezoning is not
Painful but
quite such
necessary.
an awful word when you use it in association with a new school rather than
Exactly.
just shifting people around, so.
Exactly.
Correct.
But you have a large
It
and
depends.
complex job ahead of you, Mr. Horton,
Yeah.
and a short time to do it, as they say.
Yeah, it's fuzzy math or crystal ball, and I know it's hard.
So I appreciate the questions. Wanted to make sure we hit a lot of what's out there. That's what's being talked about.
I'll get with Mr. McGinnis and make sure what we prepare for you is something that he's comfortable with you having and can address.
Right. And this is exactly why I started on this side, because I knew my colleagues would probably want to have questions. So, Dr. White, or Mr.
Well,
Destin?
No, that was all for
Okay,
me.
so Dr. White.
Okay. Well, that was some of what, of course, and I appreciate Mr. Destin, my colleague, letting me follow up on his remarks during his time. That's right, I wasn't here, and I appreciate you letting folks know that that was because we were greeting our brand-new second grandson that evening, and he's doing great, by the way. But I did have one more comment regarding the contracted services, because the public will naturally have questions about that, and we've answered those things. But I want to make sure that the public understands that in the case of speech teachers, that those services for those children are mandated by law, that we don't have any choice, that we must provide those services to those children. And so if we don't have the instructors, then we just go out and see if we can hire them on some kind of contract. But I wanted to make sure that our constituents understood that this wasn't an elective. This wasn't something that children didn't have to have. These services are required by law. We must provide these speech services, and that's why we find ourselves in the position that we are in. All right. Thank you, Mr. White.
And again, congratulations on the
Thank
grandson.
you, thank you.
Ms. Ivanchek.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Dr. Kelly?
Well, I had another comment or query. I'm sure that all of our board members have been sent the same email, but so in my past, having been the library media coordinator for a long time, I was sent a list of offensive books that are potentially located in our school, and I'll give this to Sheila or to whomever you ask me to give it to. It's a list of banned books that are located in our schools, and banned books, just for FYI, are those that are considered to be shocking, offensive, or generally make parents uncomfortable. And usually we have a screening or a vetting process through which we would let schools' points of contacts, we used to have media specialists, but school points of contacts, I guess we would say appropriately for media centers, so they would know to steer clear of these titles. But just a word of caution that we do have these apparently, according to this list, in our schools, and we may want to look at those. And for those that have multiple copies, a concern might be, are they accidentally maybe being used for class discussion? So I'll just pass this to you and you can do with it as you will, but I know you and your staff will do the best for our students.
Can I follow up with a question
Please.
about that? Could you share with me or us where this list came
I
from?
think we all got that in an email from a person who belongs to the Florida Alliance for
I don't think
I
I got it.
I didn't get that.
Okay.
No, I haven't seen it either.
Yeah.
All right.
So it came from where? Was it internally to the county or
Yeah,
outside?
The gentleman lives in the county, Mr. Shoemaker. He's with the Florida Alliance
Okay.
for Concerned Citizens, I believe.
I may be reading it.
But I know that's in days past, and I know we're not in that time anymore, but those were items of concern.
Have we confirmed that these books are really in our libraries?
I think that list was obtained by a records request. That was my understanding. So I'm seeing Eric shake his hand that, yes, we gave that list.
So these books are in every library?
No,
or
there's a
some
list of,
libraries
the
or-
list contains where they are.
Okay.
And they're banned by
Usually ALA, American Library Association.
The request that came in gave us a long list of books.
Textbooks.
It asked us to go through and see which books are in which libraries and produce that request. That's what we did. So what you're looking at, if it's the same list we created, would be the name of the school and
The title.
the title of the books that he gave us that are located at that location.
Okay, so you did a cross-reference. So, and that indicates which schools
Yes,
they're at?
yes,
Mhm.
yes.
That's correct.
I'd like to have a copy of that.
Absolutely. I can
Since you
forward
passed
you.
it out.
Mhm.
Right.
And I guess, having had some experience with this, and I know you
Yeah.
have.
Intimate.
I know
and on
that our
many
school
band
board
book
policy
committees.
addresses this kind of thing. But it's very concerning. And I know that you'll look into it.
Well, made more so concerning because we don't any longer, and understandably, have those people who are certified, who went through years of study to know how to deal with these things. We don't have those anymore. And I understand not every district does, just because of funding sources again. But just thank you for looking into that. I
Well,
know that you
if I
will.
could just add to
Yes.
that, and this is more than anyone wants to know. But you're right, we did have those people.
We
And
did.
in fact, it was an accreditation standard that we have certified media specialists in all of our schools. But guess what? They dropped that
I
standard.
understand, yeah.
And so the consequence of that was ultimately, eventually, through erosion, we lost those experts,
That's
if you
right.
will. And so it's becomes problematic for the district and schools even to provide the kind of oversight that was provided by an expert in the past that we no longer have.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to share that
Thank
reason.
you. That's true. So
Well-
just in an abundance of caution,
Yeah, and-
we'll look at it.
I understand exactly what you're talking about with our loss of expertise. However, it always makes me nervous to have some other agency banning books.
Well, we, in the library world of public education, ALA is an umbrella group that we use a lot of their suggestions and recommendations. They are who, in fact, created some of our certification programs.
On our school board policies, what does it say exactly? Dr. White, I've not looked at that section recently.
It's been years since I
Well,
have. but-
Obviously receiving this right now in the meeting, so I'm not sure, and I'd have to pull the policy to look at it, but I assure you, if we have books that are on a banned list, we will take care of it per policy.
Well, just briefly, the policy, as I remember, Mr. Attorney, allows folks that have particular complaints about a textbook or even a media book to bring that forward in an organized process, and there's a
There's
review
a
committee.
form and a review
And it goes
committee.
through the whole process. I guess what I'm hearing, and this is all impromptu, because I haven't had the opportunity to review any of this, is that it might be that in the past that we use the American Library Association list to purchase books and not purchase books. And maybe we purchased some books inadvertently, not being aware of the ALA. This is all speculation now.
And I'm
so I'm
sure that-
hesitant to even say.
Because
but
we
that
have
could be
people
how
ordering
that,
books
well,
and materials for media centers now who don't know the difference.
that might not be familiar with ALA or the list or so forth. But that's all speculation. Now, I'll just refrain from any further comments, and I know that you'll look into it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And other business. Tomorrow is the 100th day of school, and I know that in many of our schools we're having read-alouds and read-alongs. Next week is Children's Literacy Week, and again, a lot of us are serving as guest readers out in our schools next week. And then just a last note that Saturday is the service for Mayor Wise at Church on Bay Shore, 10 o'clock viewing and 11 o'clock service.
I do want to
Go
say
ahead.
something. I just happened to pull up this policy real quick, and the one thing that we might need to look at is that it says the media specialist carries out the program for choosing the books. And since we only have one media specialist left in position in our district, we might need to look at that.
I was going to say, I thought there was at least, Greg is saying three.
Oh, there's three, I'm sorry.
I know there's two
I
in
had heard there was-
Crestview.
I heard there was
so-
just one. But anyway, most of the schools, that's 3 out of, so many. So that, along with that, we need to probably look at that since that position is going away, or has gone away.
Anything else? Okay, thank you, Ms. Vanchek. And just for me, yesterday I was in Tallahassee, and board members, as your legislative liaison, I have some information to bring back to you about what's going on in Tallahassee. A lot is moving forward, but I wanted to just give you what the Florida School Board Association, which is who we depend on to give us this information. Of course, being good school board members, we also do our homework on it. And so I just wanted to be able to pass out some information that, some legislation that's going through, that's being talked about. Not, of course, we got 50 days left until it's over with. So what they call it, the sausage grinder, before we, that's what they're grinding the sausage right now. So pork. So, but I'm going to hand this information out to y'all after the meeting here. But it was a very informative meeting. We did have the Education Secretary, Mr. Corcoran, come and speak before the delegation yesterday. And today, the majority of school board members that are still there are actually, in about 1 hour, they're going to hit the Capitol and start going and visiting with our elected officials. And, of course, I believe all 5 of us, we have a good relationship with our delegation. So I know they're going to get out there and get the message out about public education in Florida. Also on Saturday, I know Mr. Chambers was talking about all the good things that was going on down on this end of the county. I happened to be at Shoal River Middle School to see the Lego competition that was going on, and what a great program. And again, Okaloosa County was represented very well, and matter of fact, the top school was Davidson. If y'all know, Mr. Sexton does an awesome job with robotics. But a shout out to Bruner Middle School, who was here at our last workshop. First year, both of their teams actually got an invite to Tallahassee. So congratulations to them. But again, like I said, board members, I'll pass this information out to you. I would also like to thank my Vice Chair, Dr. Kelly, for sitting in for me at the agenda meeting the other day.
It's a pleasure.
So I appreciate that. And we'll move on down. 16 will be public comment. And before we go, Ms. Scallon, you have anything you'd like to say? Mr. Horton, Ms. Lightbourne, Dr. Hale, Jordan, Greg? Okay. And this meeting's adjourned.
All right. It would have gone faster if I hadn't talked so much.
Hey, great discussion, though. I think it was necessary.